Hey, hey, hey. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and pull out Introduction to Ecology, Part 3, and make sure you're taking notes, highlighting, and writing additional things down. But this set of notes is all about the aquatic biomes. And so we talked about the terrestrial biomes in class, but the aquatic biomes, those are going to be the ones with, water. Okay, so the water actually covers about 75% of the Earth's surface. And I always think that's kind of ironic because your cells also have about 75% water. And so, I don't know, I just kind of think that's funny. The Earth and your cells both have 70 or 75% water. These are responsible for how much rain there is. Okay, so how much sun is directly related to the rain. And so write that down. Sun is directly related to rain. And so we talked yesterday, we talked about the Hadley model, where when sun comes down, and hits those equators, then what's going to happen is evaporation, which causes rainfall. So when the sun beams down on bodies of water, it causes evaporation. And evaporation causes precipitation, which is rain. And so do me a favor, write that in. Precipitation is rain. Even if you know it, write it anyway. Precipitation is rain. Okay, these are going to help with oxygen production. Why would that help with oxygen production? Well, oxygen is produced by photosynthesis, right? And so the more sun there is, the more photosynthesis there is, the more oxygen there is. And not just trees and plants do photosynthesis, but remember that algae does too. Okay, so when we look here, this is showing you a picture of the stratification of the water. Okay, the photic zone, just remember, photo means light. And so that's where the light's going to hit. That's where most of the algae is going to be. Algae, that's where photosynthesis is going to be. And I'm writing all these things down so you do too. Algae, photosynthesis. It's going to be warmer, right? It's going to be higher temperatures. Okay, and then, so there was the photic zone right there. The aphotic zone is going to be without light, below the light, right? So lower than the light. Okay, the benthic zone is right here. You can see this. The benthic zone is the bottom of the ocean. And that's where, like, the little organisms that dwell in the sand are going to live. Like crabs are going to burrow down into the sand, and that's where they're going to get their food. So the benthos are the organisms that feed on the bottom. The next one, the abyss, these are the deepest parts of the benthic zone, so right here. It's going to be the deep sea trenches. Colder there, little to no sunlight, not as many organisms. This would be like, and you can kind of tell from the picture, the very deepest part. Okay, the intertidal zone, that's going to be where the waves hit. Intertidal, that's where the waves hit. So in order to live in the intertidal zone, you got to be tough. You got to be able to withstand, if you're an animal, a fish, you have to be able to withstand the constant beating of the tide. So it's a very harsh environment. It's rich in biodiversity. And so what you want to write underneath biodiversity is different types of organisms. Different types of organisms. And then the coral reefs, you've seen pictures of those before. The coral reef, they're rich in biodiversity, like different kinds. They're often called the rainforest of the ocean. Rainforest of the ocean. They're endangered and therefore protected by laws. They are found in warmer water climates. So I don't necessarily want you to stop and draw this, but stop and take a minute and go through all the parts we just did and make sure that you could label these if need be tomorrow. Okay, the littoral zone and the benthic zone are freshwater. So those were all, go back to number 2, circle the word ocean, because those were all ocean. And out beside ocean, before we move any further, I want you to know that the ocean provides more food than any other biome at all. It actually has more biodiversity, different kinds of animals, more food than any of the other biomes. And to me, that's hard to grasp because the rainforest has so many organisms, but the rainforest doesn't cover 75% of the earth either. So most species, most photosynthesis comes from the ocean. Okay, move into freshwater now. So there's your coral reef. You can see those. Okay, freshwater, you only have littoral and benthic zone. And if you look, the littoral is shallow, where you find most of the organisms, light is present. So this is kind of like the photic zone, but it's it's like where you would put your feet in the river. You know, where if you took a few steps out. Most of the organisms, you want to know, most of the organisms in the littoral, and then the benthic zone is the bottom. It's going to be, darker, less light, less temperature, so it's going to be cooler. It may or may not have plants. I mean, some small trees can actually live under the water, so it just depends on how deep it is. Okay, types of ponds. So these are going to be different lakes or ponds. Oligotrophic, well, you know that O-L-I-G-O means few or little. Okay, so these are going to be nutrient poor. These are going to be beautiful bodies of water. Crystal clear, flowing, not a whole lot of green. So this is going to be clear, little plants, little animals, right? So oligotrophic are going to be really, really pretty bodies of water. And I know you've seen areas of the Cahaba where you can see the bottom. You can stand on the banks and you can see the bottom of the river. Eutrophic is going to be EU, true. So true pond. It's going to be green. It's going to be murky. It's going to have lots of plants and animals. Nutrient rich. And are fairly shallow and warm. Murky and lots of plants and animals, and you're eutrophic. Okay, and then mesotrophic. Okay, so mesotrophic is just somewhere in between eutrophic and oligotrophic. And I think the Cahaba would actually fall here in the mesotrophic. There are some areas that appear oligotrophic, and some areas of the Cahaba appear more eutrophic. So oligo, few plants and animals, crystal clear, beautiful waters. Eutrophic, think of a murky pond. Green, lots of fish, lots of algae, lots of plants. Okay, streams are your last topic, streams and rivers. The first one you have are the headwaters, and these are located in the mountains. So bodies of water, head, up in the top, located in the mountains. Waters are cold, clear, narrow, nutrient poor, with lots of dissolved oxygen, so oxygen in the water, that affects the animals and plants found here. High oxygen demands organisms such as trout. So lots of trout are going to live there. Okay, next we have a midstream. These are located between the mountains, so not in the mountains. Circle the word between, midway between the mountains, right? Think about it. It's going to get the water from the mountains is going to run down like in a valley. Waters are warm. They're slower. They're wider, nutrient rich, and they're murky due to the erosion from the mountains. Lower dissolved oxygen, and then plants and animals are so-so, moderate, so-so. Okay, estuary, where freshwater meets saltwater. This is like the bay. You've probably been to the beach before and you've seen the bay on the other side. So the estuary is like kind of saltwater, kind of freshwater. And if you think about it, there's certain animals, like fish, that are freshwater fish, and there's certain that are saltwater fish. So what types of animals would live in an estuary? Well, lots of animals can live in the estuary because some of the freshwater fish can actually live in a little bit of salt content. Some of the saltwater fish can live in a little bit of the freshwater. And so these are very rich in biodiversity. So estuaries are very rich in biodiversity. The wetlands, these are land possessing water. This is going to be, if you've ever heard of a swamp, you may have watched Swamp People on TV. I don't watch that show, so I don't know much about it. I'm not promoting that show or anything like that, so I don't know what it's about. But I know one time when I was little, my mom took me to Dolphin Island. I was raised by a science teacher, and we walked through the marsh, and it was basically like muddy water, like more mud than water maybe. Up to when I was young, it was up to my waist, but probably now it'd be up to my, knees or thighs. But, so that would be a marsh, and there's one off Dolphin Island. Okay, so swamps are going to be, have trees, and marshes are going to have grass. They are very rich in biodiversity. Lots of bacteria and organisms and even plants can live in there, and they're protected by laws also. These are going to help reduce the flooding because they hold water in that mud. And so it says flooding by holding rainwater or hurricane waters. These are very important for us. All right, so I hope this was helpful.